Hi everyone, thanks for joining to watch my SLOconf talk about SLIs the hard way. But first, let me introduce myself. I'm Ioannis. I'm a senior engineering manager at Paddle, and I'm responsible for the SRE team there. At Paddle, we're offering a payment infrastructure that's easy for customers to integrate by taking all the pain points like compliance, tax, and all these nice things away from them and make it easy to just sell their software. I work in the SRE and SLO community for around 2 years now. So it's a really great experience so far, learning lots of things and working with great folks around the globe. But first, let's explain what is an SLI. So an SLI is a service level indicator, a carefully defined quantitative measure of some aspect of the level of a service that is provided. This comes from the SRE book, but in more simply, SLI can be built from everyday metrics. It's just another metric or indicator in this case. It can be built from everyday metrics around load balancers or pretty much anything you have around in your platform. But first, let's talk about request-based SLIs. So the most simple SLIs I will use will be around availability and the number of 500 status codes that you get in your request. This is a great starting point for the majority of the applications you have in your infrastructure. The next one will be latency. And in this case, you can use percentiles and set targets around them, or you can use histograms to have more flexibility and change targets in the future. Histograms, it's not something that lots of platforms offer by default. So you may have to rely on percentiles with whatever means for your application monitoring. And as mentioned before, like load balancers from any cloud provider will give you most of this for free. So it's a really great starting point to start building SLIs around these metrics. But what happens when you have a service that is owned by multiple teams, like monoliths or any kind of this kind of pattern? In order to build an SLIs, you will need to know who owns what and what zone you want to cover. So this will bring some extra dependencies and extra challenges, but it will be for a good point because you're going to learn lots about your applications, even though just talking about this. So yeah, what you can do there is group your endpoints, and in this case, you're going to need something more clever than the load balancer, maybe your APM solution, Prometheus, or anything similar that gives you more functionality about grouping endpoints and the various metrics around it. So my advice in this would be not try to overly complicate these SLIs from the start. Like start with something generic, and then if go more specific if you want to cover something more specific. For multiple data centers, like some of us, we deploy infrastructure to multiple regions around the world. This alone is a big challenge, but also measuring this, it's a completely bigger challenge on top of this. So you can go with some simply global SLIs to just for reporting and trying to understand how in general you're performing, and then a lot more specific and alert-based for data center specific SLIs. And the next thing I want to cover is web apps or browser apps, or how you call them, that is heavily used in the SaaS world. There are many ways to build SLIs around this. So synthetic traffic is one option to capture trends, but not possibly to rely for alerting, as it can have lots of external factors, including low traffic probes or any other kind of interaction. The most common metrics to capture user experience on browsers in general are the largest contentful paint and the first input delay. That both of these metrics have some de facto values in the industry that you can use and try to achieve. But as everything in SLO, you can also have your own targets that meet your user needs. The challenge with these metrics is that not lots of third parties will give you this data. So it will be very hard to build SLIs on this. But if you're the lucky one that your platform offers that, highly recommend to go and use them to measure your user experience. The next one is cron jobs. Like crons can be used pretty much for everything. In this case, I'm going to cover two basic scenarios. The one is like you pulling from a queue, and then you have items, and then you process the items, and that's it. And the next one can be you wake up your job, you do a job, and then you shut down. So at Pandu, we found very useful to measure the correctness or let's say availability of these jobs using our log system. So the idea is pretty simple. We log something when we actually get the data and the items from a queue. Maybe we load the batch size or how many items are there or something like this. and the same when it completes with the failures or non-failures, etc. This way, we build some nice SLIs for that. Logs are tricky because logs are high cardinality. So it can be cases where you achieve 101% reliability. So my suggestion is to use bigger reporting windows and always allow to have a better slow burn alerts in place so you catch things after the fact. The next one is like low traffic SLIs. This is very challenging, and it's challenging because a single error or like a small amount of errors can break your error budget without meaning that your service is actually unreliable. Also can be happen division by zero. Like if you don't have data, maybe sometimes you divide by zero to get your calculations. This will break everything. So my suggestion for these things would be to use them for performance tracking and trends, but not actually for alerting and waking up your on-call team. Again, SLOs are great, but it's not like something you should use for everything, for alerting all the time. So in this case, I recommend to not use them for alerting. And last but not least, and possibly my favorite SLIs is for internal tooling. Like internal tooling SLIs usually have all the challenges that I mentioned before. So I'd like to focus the two main systems that most of us will have in our infrastructures. First of all is CI/CD. So yeah, everyone has one, or I hope everyone has one in this 2022. But there's some nice metrics around build times, waiting times, or your error rate in your default branches. Like all these kinds of nice metrics, if they can be exported from CI/CD provider, would be very good as like candidates to actually understand how the developers experience and interact with your platform. And the next one is backups. Like backups, something that no one cares until everyone cares. So at Paddle, we use the log-based solution I mentioned before to measure various things around backups. This can be like the start to finish time or like availability, how many errors you get, etc. And most of the time, these SLOs will be 100%. And this is how a good combination of logs are high cardinality, but in this case, your logs are not that many. So it works perfectly to measure this kind of applications. And then, building SLIs or discussing about what you want to measure and how is probably one of the most great experience in the SLO framework. It's a combination of product tech and availability chats that I found very rewarding and always learn more about the platform when we have these chats. Thanks for listening. I hope you learned something more about the SLIs and how fun is working with them day to day.